The findings of US intelligence are not surprising, though their publication is astonishing. Mohammed bin Salman, the heir to the throne of the world's biggest oil exporter, accused of possible involvement in murder. The victim was Jamal Khashoggi, a famous Saudi journalist who entered his consulate in Istanbul in 2018, never to be seen again. Turkish intelligence recorded his killers cutting up his body, which is believed to have been transferred in these bags, though it's never been found. We assess that Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved an operation in Istanbul, Turkey, to capture or kill Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, the report says. Since 2017, the Crown Prince has had absolute control of the kingdom's security and intelligence organisations, making it highly unlikely that Saudi officials would have carried out an operation of this nature without the Crown Prince's authorisation. The report concludes that the Crown Prince viewed Khashoggi as a threat to the kingdom and broadly supported using violent measures, if necessary, to silence him. The planes carrying the hit squad had diplomatic clearance, and they were owned by a wealth fund controlled by the Crown Prince. All 15 men either worked for the Crown Prince's media office or in the Royal Guard. Today's report says 7 of them were in the Prince's elite protection squad and answered only to him. They include Brigadier General Maher Mutreb, seen close to the Crown Prince in Texas a few months before the murder. Mutreb was also seen in the Prince's entourage during his visit to Downing Street that same year. The report says the Crown Prince's then advisor, Saud al-Qahtani, was in charge of the media office and claimed that he didn't make decisions without the Crown Prince's say-so. It took a 13-day Saudi clean-up before Turkish police were allowed into the crime scene, even longer before they admitted that Khashoggi had been murdered. The Crown Prince all the while denying any involvement.
Did you order the murder of Jamal Khashoggi?
Absolutely not. This was a heinous crime. But I take full responsibility as a leader in Saudi Arabia, especially since it was committed by individuals working for the Saudi government.
The Crown Prince is 35 and said to be the King's favourite son. He's charismatic, in looks a throwback to the tribal chiefs of old, but without the Western education many of his 11 full and half brothers have.
We are the oldest ally of France of America and the Middle East. Right. More than 80 years of alliance.
He's transformed his country by allowing women to drive, by taking religious police off the streets and allowing cinemas and pop concerts instead. But Donald Trump's presidency, Saudi was his first foreign visit, appeared to give the prince cover for letting his ruthless side and his intolerance of dissent run riot. He'd struck up a friendship with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, who was trying to forge a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians. And Trump was so enamored of arms deals
$3 billion,
that he preferred to equivocate on the Crown Prince's alleged guilt.
And it's just like I said, I think it was maybe he did, maybe he didn't. They did not make that assessment. The CIA has looked at it, they've studied it a lot, they have nothing definitive.
Joe Biden has so far refused to speak to the Crown Prince.
Have you read the Jamal Khashoggi report yet from the ODNI?
Yes, I have.
The president raised human rights with the prince's father, King Salman, last night. He's 85 and unwell, though well enough to host last year's G20 summit, with his son at his side. But how much is the king really in charge now? And how long dare America sideline his heir, given the importance of oil, arms sales and the war against ISIS and al-Qaeda? The prince's reputation is now on a par with that of Vladimir Putin, who high-fived him just a few weeks after the Khashoggi murder. Though Loujain al-Hathloul, a women's rights activist, was released from jail this month, the Americans want more political prisoners set free, and for the Crown Prince to end the war he launched in Yemen.
We are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sale.
But Biden's not in the business of toppling the Crown Prince or destabilising his kingdom. And anyway, the prince has had his main rivals arrested. Prince Ahmed, the king's only surviving full brother, and the previous crown prince, Mohammed bin Nayef, the man the CIA had groomed and hoped would become king.
I think what the Biden administration will push for is a change of behavior rather than regime change. They might promote a rival to Mohammed bin Salman, but it is very, very difficult, as it will be so obvious that the Biden administration is directly involved should there be a change of personnel at the very top.
Khashoggi's eldest son Salah, who led the family's mourning for his father, has forgiven his killers, 8 of whom have been jailed. And after meeting the king and crown prince, the family is understood to have received millions of dollars worth of property and cash in unofficial compensation. But the dead man's Turkish fiancée, Hatice Cengiz, is suing the crown prince and the hit squad for damages in an American court. Khashoggi had only entered the consulate to collect a document allowing him to marry her, and today's report is, in her eyes, only the first step towards real justice.
Jonathan Rugman reporting. Well, joining me now is Dr. Sanam Vakil, who's a senior research fellow at the Foreign Affairs think tank Chatham House here in London. And we hope to be joined later, in a minute rather, by Bob Jordan, who served as the US ambassador to Riyadh just after the 9/11 attacks to 2003. Let's go to you first of all, Dr. Sanam Vakil. I mean, this is not a huge surprise. We all suspected that he was behind it, but to hear it spelt out in black and white by the American administration is quite a shocker. How difficult will it be for the UK and the US government to sideline Mohammed bin Salman, who is, after all, now an alleged murderer?
It's a very good question, of course, but I don't think that that is the intention of the US government or the UK government, depending on how they're going to react. Neither country is in the business of regime change right now. The climate of the world is very preoccupied and insular. COVID and economic concerns are dominating. And the Middle East is a real heated ball of tension. There is no appetite for getting involved in the weeds and trying to unseat Mohammed bin Salman. What the Biden administration is clearly trying to do is to set a precedent that the killing of Jamal Khashoggi is a red line not to be tolerated, to differentiate themselves from the Trump administration, and demonstrate, as Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, just stated, to show resolve that this administration is going to do things differently. So they'll push back. And this is what it's meant to really achieve right now. Okay.
Let's go to Ambassador Bob Jordan. Bob Jordan, thank you very much for coming on the programme. You were a personal friend of Jamal Khashoggi's. How important was today's announcement for you personally?
Well, I haven't seen him in a number of years, but we were friends when I was ambassador and had a number of meetings. It has personal significance to me. I think it's long overdue that this report was released. I certainly think that the conclusions are consistent with all of the media reports we've seen. And I think it's about time that, that this report was released. I agree with Dr. Zakil that it doesn't mean that the Crown Prince somehow can never have any further conversations or relations with the United States. But I do think accountability is in order.
And how awkward is it for the Biden administration, despite all its protestations, that it'll have to do business eventually with a king who is also an alleged murderer? It's terribly awkward, and it would be very uncomfortable. I do think the first step is the release of this report. It's ripping the Band-Aid off of some denial, I think, that was engaged in by the previous administration. And I do think it's important, as Dr. Zakil says, that we also join with our allies in having a common attitude toward the results of this report and where we go going forward. Dr. Vakil, do you think that the administration could use this as leverage to bring about more reforms inside Saudi Arabia? I mean, I know they've allowed women to drive cars, but they've also arrested and imprisoned women who were campaigning for that very thing, for instance.
I think this is very much the intention. Again, to draw a line in the sand, the Biden administration is looking to assert, I think quite forcefully, that human rights is back on the agenda. President Biden, when he spoke at the Munich Security Conference, made a very clear statement saying America is back and America is going to engage in a multilateral way and defend democratic values. And I think putting human rights on the agenda and trying to draw a line in the sand in their relations with Riyadh to say that this sort of behavior, the detention of human rights activists for a long, protracted period of time is unacceptable. And it goes beyond women's rights activists and human rights activists. There are many people, including Mohammed bin Nayef, the former crown prince, and others that are also in detention in Saudi Arabia. So I think this is an opportunity for the Biden administration to challenge the status quo and push the kingdom to address some of these concerns.
And of course, there's no way of actually changing the succession inside Saudi Arabia. So, Bob Jordan, to what extent does this actually change the very delicate and rather difficult diplomatic dance between, the United States, Iran, and Saudi Arabia?
Well, certainly the United States and Saudi Arabia, along with the Emiratis and Israel, have a common interest in limiting the reach of Iran, limiting their malign activities. And so I do think that we will need to remain in close contact with the Saudis as we deal with Iran and their nuclear program. But we also have to deal with Iran regarding their activities in the region. And this is where I think the Saudis are particularly interested. It does give us some leverage, I think, in terms of how we deal with the Saudis and their reaction to Iran's activities. We certainly need to make it clear that if we're heading back toward a nuclear agreement, the Saudis cannot be allowed to sabotage that agreement. They're going to have to tolerate, I think, efforts by the United States, the P5+1, to try to bring this agreement back into being, into effective being. And so I think, in a way, this is the Biden administration making it clear that we're charting our course. The Saudis need to be cooperative if they're willing to abide those outcomes.
A delicate dance indeed. Ambassador Bob Jordan and Dr. Sanam Vakil, thank you very much to both of you.